You have seen the headlines about AI minting new millionaires, but looking at the actual data for entry-level tech jobs, starting pay is actually dropping. For a standard software engineer, someone building basic backends or writing React components, compensation is hitting a brick wall. Mid-level roles are stalled out in the 12 to 22 lakh range, but in those exact same cities, specialized AI engineers are pulling in 1.1 to 1.5 crores, completely bypassing traditional local pay scales without ever leaving the country. Looking at salary data from 2024 to 2026, we see a hard split. This bottom flat line represents generalist software engineers as companies aggressively adopt AI coding agents to automate junior-level tasks. But this top line rapidly crosses the 1.5 crore mark for AI specialists. Driven by global leveling, US and EU startups now hire Indian talent directly at global remote rates. This creates a massive geo-arbitrage advantage. You earn a salary pegged to the US dollar, keeping living expenses pegged to the Indian rupee. As an engineer in 2026, you have a choice. You can stay in the traditional, safe local talent pool, or you can aggressively upskill to compete in the global remote pool. Reaching the 1.5 crore mark involves a strategic decision about exactly where and how you sell your skills to maximize your actual purchasing power. The Indian tech market has cleanly divided into 3 distinct employment tiers, and each comes with a very different compensation cap. This matrix breaks down the landscape across 3 metrics: base pay, performance equity, and job security. First, the domestic MNCs like TCS or Infosys. You get high job security and excellent HR benefits, but your senior earnings hit a hard, relatively low ceiling. Next is the Tier 1 Indian product companies like Zomato or Flipkart. The base pay is much better, capped somewhere around 65 lakhs to 1.2 crores for senior roles, but it is still anchored to local economic limits. Finally, the remote global tier. This is where you see base salaries of $100,000 to $180,000. Adjusted for purchasing power parity, that translates to a lifestyle equivalent of 83 lakhs to well over 1.5 crores. But there is a catch. In this global tier, up to 42% of your total compensation is often tied to equity and performance bonuses. You assume the risk that the startup might fail. Career safety has a literal price tag. If you want the comfort of domestic HR benefits, the trade-off is forfeiting the massive financial upside of US dollar revenue shares. A $200,000 salary in California sounds incredible until you subtract federal tax, state tax, and Bay Area rent. A $100,000 remote salary in India actually offers a vastly higher standard of living. This wealth transfer is actively playing out in hubs like Bengaluru, Hyderabad, and Pune right now. Let's look at the tax math. If you take a high-end local job paying 60 lakhs as a salaried employee, you are hit with an effective tax rate of about 30%. If you work globally, you can operate as an independent contractor. That unlocks a specific provision in the Indian tax code, Section 44 ADA. This chart compares your actual take-home pay between a 60 lakh local role and a $150,000 global remote role. On the left, the local salary fills up, and then standard income tax instantly takes a massive 30% bite out of your gross pay. On the right, the remote contractor salary fills up to the equivalent of 1.25 crores. Under Section 44 ADA, as long as your initial gross receipts are under 75 lakhs, or you structure it properly, you are only taxed on 50% of your income. Add in a letter of undertaking for 0% GST, and your effective tax drops to around 15%. Global remote work is a structural shift in how you build personal wealth, combining an advantageous tax code with global purchasing power. To get here, you have to ignore the hype. Knowing how to write a good prompt is no longer enough. The entry-level market is so saturated that starting pay for basic AI roles actually dropped by 5% over the last year. To command a 1.5 crore premium, you need what we call a skill stack multiplier. Global employers only pay that kind of money to engineers who can bridge the production gap, taking an AI model from a local notebook and making it run reliably in the real world. This chart maps out exactly which specializations are driving the highest salary multipliers in the 2026 market. First is MLOps. using tools like Kubernetes and BentoML. Solving the unglamorous deployment bottleneck gives you a 15 to 40% salary premium. Next, we have agentic systems, built with LangGraph or Crore AI. Companies are shifting from basic chatbots to agents that can execute complex workflows autonomously. That earns a 20 to 35% boost. At the absolute peak of the chart is AI security and red teaming, commanding a 25 to 50% premium. Strict regulatory bodies like the European Parliament are making safe, auditable AI a legal requirement, which is exactly why the market is paying this premium. The global market has stopped rewarding people for what they know in theory. It strictly pays for what you can ship and secure in production. To actually land one of these roles, you need a clear framework to decide your path and a playbook to negotiate your worth. This 2026 career decision tree asks, can you ship models to production? If no, return to the domestic track. If yes, move to risk tolerance. Handling B2B contracting leads to the global remote jackpot. Otherwise, target Tier 1 product companies. When you get to the offer stage, do not make the mistake of anchoring your request to your previous domestic CTC. Doing so immediately positions you as a cheap local hire rather than global talent. Instead, frame your ask around global return on investment. Remind the employer that paying you $150,000 remotely still saves them over $150,000 in office overhead, benefits, and local taxes compared to hiring someone on site in San Francisco. And use this 2026 specific tactic. Demand a compute stipend of $500 to $1,000 a month for personal H100 or A100 GPU instances. It proves to the founders that you are a serious researcher who stays ahead of the curve. We are living in an era of global leveling. The generalist track will always be there to offer safety, but crossing the production gap and mastering the remote contracting model is how Indian engineers are achieving early financial independence in 2026.